Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatore. Don't you just love it when you discover a castle by accident, randomly? So what's funny is I'm at Bramber Castle in Sussex, in East Sussex, and I've actually been here before, but I promptly forgot the name of it and forgot where it was. I'm on my self-employed Friday, driving around doing a bit of business, and I'm driving along and I see a sign for a castle, and lo and behold, here is a castle, but it's a bit special because that up there is a Motte and Bailey castle. So this was built very soon after William the Conqueror's conquest. Probably there was a wooden Motte and Bailey thrown up here quite soon after the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and we know that by 1076 there was a substantial castle here, and that there is the earthen mound. We're going to have a proper look at that in a minute, but it's quite unusual because the castle as a whole, so you can see there was a later stone curtain wall put up here, and there's various other bits of curtain wall. If I point over there, about where my finger is there, there's a bit more curtain wall. You can see it's all fallen into ruin, there's not very much still standing. There's a little bit, if I go around there, there's a little bit of curtain wall around here surviving. And it seems that the castle was only in use for a couple of hundred years and then fell into ruin. So hence there isn't much later castle here really. We've essentially got a Norman period 11th century Motte and Bailey castle there, and then you've got a later stone curtain wall thrown up all around here. Oh, that's cool, doing that spinning around. And there's a large part of it here that's obviously part of the front sort of entrance of the castle, and there's a little bit of what was a gatehouse remaining. There's also, just down here, if we just walk over, it's a beautiful day, incidentally. I'm enjoying the sun, last bit of sun probably for the year. And there is a church down there as well, and that was built probably in the 13th century. So it seems that this site was in use from pretty much straight after the Norman conquest in 1066 until some point during the 13th century. So I'm going to do a cheat, and I'm just going to read out the information board, which is down there, and I'll also focus on it after I finish talking, so if you want you can pause the video and you can read it yourself. But it says that this was built shortly after the Norman conquest to help protect King William I, William the Bastard, later known as William the Conqueror, to protect his newly won territories in Sussex, and this is called Bramber Castle. And it was the seat of the, now I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but De Braose family, Braose I would think it is, De Braose family, who'd come over and fought alongside William at the Battle of Hastings and subsequently, subsequent campaigns. So it was part of a network of castles that were built to guard the strategic areas around the south coast of England, particularly in Sussex. And the region was divided into areas called rapes. That's right, rapes, strange name, each protecting a vulnerable point in the coastline. Bramber defended the Adder Gap through the South Downs, where the River Adder flowed to the sea. So it was obviously, William couldn't throw up castles everywhere, so when he decided to tell people, his essentially knights, his commanders who'd fought with him at Hastings, where to throw up a castle, it was very much decided by points of the landscape that needed that type of kind of harnessing of power. Turn around so you get a bit of a different view. William de Braose, who lived from about 1049 to 1094, he'd accompanied William of Normandy, and he was granted the Rape of Bramber, hence this is called Bramber Castle. And he built the first castle here in 1073, although, as I mentioned, based on what I've read, it's entirely possible that something was thrown up here before 1073. He also founded the church below the castle, and later on the town actually grew up. So the town is, so down this path down there, there's the church down there, and if you keep going down that way there's a town down there somewhere, but we'll walk around and see if we can see anything from the sort of perimeter wall in a minute. And the castle remained in the de Braose family hands for over 200 years, but with neglect and erosion from the later Middle Ages it fell into ruin. from the 17th century, the castle became much admired for its picturesque beauty. Anybody would know this if you live in Britain, but people outside Britain watching this might not know, but a lot of castles were destroyed systematically and deliberately in the 17th century because of the English Civil War. This, it seems, was not one of those, because it had already fallen into ruin, so there was no need to ruin it further, because it wasn't, presumably it wasn't perceived to be a defendable position. But let's go around and have a little look and see what else we can see around here. I can see there's quite a lot of standing stuff, but I'm going to have to move around and show you it, and you can see some of the castle rather than more of my face, which I'm sure will be better for you guys. So my interpretation of this standing structure is this is probably what remains of the front tower, the main tower on the castle. Perhaps it was a stone keep, it's difficult to say really, but you can see, if I put my finger, you can see those are post holes there for a floor and another floor, and obviously that's a that's a window. I'm sure you can tell that that's a window, but interestingly there's no space underneath here that I can see for any other floors, which suggests that maybe there was some type of large gatehouse or entrance here. So my interpretation would be that this is a large frontal tower that also is a form of entrance or gatehouse, and that probably had some type of large opening in the front here. There's a little bit of the other side, what I imagine is the accompanying wall, and you can see the gap's not huge. It's what about oh, you're going to ask me to do this in metric now, aren't you? What is that, 5 meters? Something like that? I don't know. I'm not very good with meters. It's about 20 feet. And you can see the top of the church looking through there. It's possible, difficult to tell, but it's possible that this would have been faced. I can't see any facing stones, but they could have been robbed out to build other buildings around here. Let's go around this way. So we're essentially now walking around the perimeter wall. There's a hump here. Oh, going up my hump. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to tell on camera, but there is a severe drop down there. Okay, so where you see this hedge going all around this edge here, there's actually essentially a drop right off the edge there, and this is obviously the plateau. This is the edge of where the perimeter wall was, and off this edge, despite the fact there isn't much wall here, you might be able to see down there. If you can see, down there is quite a drop. If I were to just walk about 10 feet forward, I would fall down a great big hill and end up in a ditch. And you can see how high up we are, hopefully, by that field there. I'll try and focus on you see there's a gate. There's a gate just about there, and you can see we're actually quite high up. And if I hold the camera up, you can see we have got an absolutely incredible view from up here, but unfortunately it's obscured a bit by the bushes and trees, and I have to say, if I was maintaining this site, I'd be tempted to hack them down. There might be some kind of protection on them for wildlife, but look, there we go. So this is how high up we are, and that's how high you can see. I mean, you can literally see from hilltop to hilltop. So we're on a very strategically important and useful bit of land here, and very high up. And you imagine anybody attacking this well, they're not going to unless they've got a very serious army. They're just not going to bother. But more than defensive, people always tend to think about castles in defensive terms, but you've got to think about them as statements on the landscape and sort of shock and awe. You know, the best weapons are the weapons you don't need to use, and for the most part that's what castles were. That's a pretty nice view. I love Sussex in general. I love both West Sussex and East Sussex. It's the land of a significant proportion of my ancestors. I am a South Saxon, so the word Sussex comes from South Saxon. But I've also got other bits of, obviously I've got a bit of Scottish and various other bits in me. That's clearly a long way. I don't know how many miles away that is, but this, you can see a very, very long way from here. Now you can see the drop down here, hopefully. So that's, if I'm holding the camera horizontal at the moment, so parallel to the ground, and I tilt down and you can see there's my foot, and you can see it's quite a drop down there, quite a bank, and it goes all the way down, straight down to that land level down there. So we're really high up. There's no wall surviving here, but I think there was a wall. In fact, I know there was a wall because they've done a reconstruction drawing, which I'll go and look at in a bit. There's some cows in the distance. And again, it's interesting because whilst this is more or less flat, and this, what looks like just a big bunch of trees, is actually hiding the motte, or the earthen mound, which would have been the original fortification, and probably originally only would have had a wooden palisade around it, and obviously later on the stone wall was built. And here we've got significant more stone structure. So, we've got parts of a tower. Parts of some kind of building anyway. So going around here, and now that is without a shadow of doubt the most significant bit of perimeter wall, along with that bit still standing. So let's go and have a look at that for a minute. My understanding of the reconstruction and the explanation is that this perimeter wall would have gone all the way around here. So everything you can see here, bear in mind that mound in the middle is an earth mound, and I'm going to climb up it in a minute. That is the original 11th century Norman motte, and bear in mind it's obviously eroded, okay, so it would have been steeper and higher, although it's fairly steep and high as it is, and it would have been a mound of earth, and on top it would have had a keep built on it. Now probably, I'm not certain about this, but probably the original keep was wood, or it's possible that shortly after 1066, or in 1066, a wooden one was thrown up, and then that was replaced soon after by a stone one. That was the general pattern with Norman keeps, even like the Tower of London. The general pattern was throw up something in wood, so you've got something on the landmark to mark it, and then as soon as you can, you throw up a stone one. So this is the perimeter wall. So I'm going to try and climb up this. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'm going to do it. I can see other people have been. Right, there we go. We're up on the rampart now. It's very interesting actually, because you can see there is what looks like a walking surface, and then there's a standing up bit to the side of it, and it looks like to me I'm basically on, that's interesting, that looks like the remnants of a window, doesn't it? Now I don't know if you can see, that's a good drop down there. You won't have to climb up that with people throwing things at you. Right, just have to be careful here because I'm walking on a high wall at the same time as holding a camera and talking to you. There's another one of these slots. I assume these slots are part of the remnants of some kind of window. Certainly they'd be useful if someone was coming up against the wall for shooting or throwing things down. Right, so I am right up on top of the wall now. You can hopefully see. So that end of the wall is lower, and I'm at the high end of the wall now. And you can see along here, there's a very definite step down and across. So it seems, unless it's been cut like that in more recent times, it seems like this is the walking top of the wall, and this would have gone up higher, probably to kind of waist, or no, probably even chest height actually, up here, that you stand behind. So this is where your people man the walls if you need them to man the walls. And you can also see, I think we've got buttresses here. So rather than having a flat wall, what the danger of that you always have then is if you've just got a flat wall, that it can collapse in on itself. So you put these buttresses out at intervals just to increase the strength of it. Or it could be that they show that there were extensions coming out here that formed part of some kind of room or lodge or something. So there we go. So this perimeter wall would have gone all the way around there, and you can see it's a fairly large space, and inside of this perimeter you could fit all manner of sheds and buildings and accommodation and horse stables and food stores and everything else you need, you know, barrels of beer and all kinds. There's a lot of space up here. So This is not just a place for soldiers to be, not just a place to protect and to make a statement on the landscape, it's also a place for keeping provisions. So if you've got an army that's going around in the field, scouting around here, putting down any rebellious kind of activity, then you want them to be provisioned. So this could be like a depot, if you view it like a barracks, like an army barracks as well. So there may not have been, in normal peaceful times, there would not have been many people actually based here at all, but there might have been lots of material and goods, might have been lots of you know, hay and grain and bread and kind of ale and, you know, supplies basically, so that forces could be provisioned and supplied as needs be. Let's just walk around here. There's a curious mound in that corner. I think again that's probably just a remnant. There's probably some standing stones underneath there that are now covered up with turf. And this is the corner. This is one corner of the, and again, wow, that is a really, I really don't think you'll be able to see, unfortunately, because it's too dark in contrast with the light leaves. But that is quite a hell of a drop down there. It is a long way. That is a long way down. It's deceptive. When you're up here, you feel like you're in a field because it's large and flat. But we are on like a tabletop, essentially. It's a nice butterfly. Yeah, indeed. So that's a pretty graphic description of what would happen if I walked forwards about 10 feet. Yeah, it really is a steep drop, and you know, I'm not exaggerating or bigging it up, it really is. Right, let's walk over and have a little look at that tower now that the girl with her dog is gone. And then to finish off, I will go up the mound. Whoa, steep. Oh, there's a bit more perimeter wall here, curtain wall, and again this is just remnants of it really. It's just the base of it. Something that's very important, well not very important, but something you should note is that one of the reasons that we lose a lot of bits of castles is local townspeople, when a castle's not in use anymore, come along and take the stone away to make their houses out of. Same thing happened with the pyramids in Egypt. In fact, the Grand Mosque in Cairo is made of bits of the Great Pyramids. Right, so here we go. We're in some type of chamber here. It's interesting. We've got very substantial corners. What is almost certainly, yeah, in fact, definitely a doorway. Okay, we've got remnants. So that shows us there was indeed facing stone. So what you've got here are carved masonry, carved essentially facing stones or cornerstones, and then what you see here is mostly rubble that fills the inner part of the wall. So this could have been, I mean, it's not definite that it had facing stones. Oh, there's a pretty good clue down here though. Let's have a look at these. Look, those I think are probably the remnants of facing stones. So yeah, and they go all the way along here. So it looks to me, and we got more over here, it looks to me like this was probably faced, and again nicely carved, substantial stones on the corners of this door. So what have we got here? Let's zoom out as much as possible. So we've got a door here and a door here, probably door this side and door this side. So it's some type of quite substantial gatehouse into what seems to be a tower originally. So you can see that this was originally going up much higher. That's about one head higher than I can stand, so it's about 7 foot tall from the ground. But then we step down into a very interesting, there we go, it's looking back at the yeah, a very interesting structure that looks to me like it was part of a D-shaped, because we've got this curved front or outward facing edge to it, a D-shaped tower, probably just looking out over that view. And interestingly, the drop here has a step to it. So this area here is level, but then it drops drastically down over there, down to the level of that land there. So the level of that land comes right the way up to about here, and then there's a kind of raised bit, I don't know why. So there we go, interesting tower. I can't say much more about it than that, other than that we've definitely got more masonry stones fitted in here. Walls generally inside buildings like this would not have been bare stone, like in movies they normally are. They would have been plastered and painted and often had tapestries hung on them. So inside a room like this would have been brightly coloured quite often, or at the very least painted in bold colours. Now let's have a go up this motte. So this mound is an 11th century mound of earth. It's not just a hill, it's man-made. So it's a hill on a hill. Right, here we go, up the muddy track. Oh, it's a bit slippy. Oh, okay. Oh, it's actually quite steep. Now we're inside the trees. Hopefully you can see the angle. So we're looking at, it's not quite 40, I'd say it's about a 30-degree slope, 30-degree slope upwards. I'm going to walk tangentially up the side over these roots so I don't fall on my arse. That'd probably make quite a funny video. Oh, wow, it's the top of the motte. So originally there would have been a keep up here. Now the fact that there is no keep up here kind of makes me assume that it was wood, and that there was never a stone keep up here. I can't see any remnants of stone up here at all. So what's entirely possible, I'll turn around and face the camera a bit now, I'm about out of breath. What's entirely possible is that this whole area round here was thrown up with earth, like I said, in, let's say, between 1066 and 1070, whatever they said, 1073. They threw up the earth here and put a great big wooden tower on the top of it. The wooden tower would have been 2 or 3 stories high and given a phenomenal view for miles all around here. They almost certainly would have cleared away all of the trees. So again, it's something that you don't necessarily recognise or see or notice when you visit a medieval castle today, because they let the trees grow up, because trees are pretty, people like trees, birds live in them, squirrels live in them, you know, there's wildlife. But originally a castle is a military structure that's partly about status, partly about defence, and partly about observation. And you know, it's like a watchtower. And so therefore you have to clear all of the undergrowth all around it, because what you don't want are people being able to creep up to it under cover of trees and bushes. And secondly, what you don't want are things going on that you can't observe. So you want to be able to see as far as possible and see anyone approaching you. So it's really important that, you know, if this was back in the 11th century, if we went back in time, I think you should imagine what you would see here, let's say in 1075. In 1075, what you'd see here is a massive hill, one of the largest hills for miles around here, that's been levelled out on the top, and then a lot of the earth that's been taken to level it out has been like pushed up to build this mound that we're standing on now. And on this mound there would have been a wooden tower 2 or 3 stories high. It would have had a door halfway up it with steps up the side so that you couldn't attack the door at ground level, or rather at motte level, at mound level. So it would have been, for the time, for the 11th century, you know, in Anglo-Saxon England essentially, it would have been a very, very strong and defensive structure, and something completely alien to the Anglo-Saxons who lived here. They'd never seen motte and baileys before, maybe some who'd travelled abroad had, but they were completely alien and foreign to this land, completely new invention, and intrinsic to the Norman war machine and how the Normans conquered and controlled England, and in fact other areas, Sicily and other areas they went to as well. So that's what would have been here, okay? Massive hill, a mound on top of the hill, and then a wooden tower on top of that. And additionally, almost certainly there would have been a wooden palisade around the base of this mound. But there's no remnants of that obviously surviving. And then at some point, probably in the 12th century, they obviously designed, castles changed, and stone came in pretty rapidly in the 11th century, after the building of keeps. But it seems like for whatever reason they decided not to build a stone keep here, instead to throw up a perimeter wall right the way around the flattened top of the hill, and then have stone towers coming off it. So just a final appendix to what I've said previously. I find it interesting to see that they have dated these perimeter walls as 14th century, which they very well may be, but they have said in their text that the castle fell to ruins in the later Middle Ages and after a couple of centuries. So I'm a bit confused about what story they're telling here. If these are 14th century, and they could be, there's not very much of them standing to judge. They could equally, from my point of view, be 13th century. But if they're 14th century, why were they building new perimeter walls at presumably great expense around something that was just about to go out of use? It seems strange to me. It's also interesting, as you can see here, they've dated, I am here, they have dated that structure and the church and everything to 11th to 12th century, so that would be that. Colour me dubious. I don't know if that seems right to me. To me, they seem 13th century, not 11th or 12th century. I mean, for a start, we've got a mound over there that's an 11th century motte and bailey, and there must have been a wooden structure on the top. So to say that this is 11th or 12th century seems strange to me, given that they never bothered to build a stone keep on the top of that mound. Presumably it was only ever a wooden keep, and by the time that they decided to build this, must have been after the wooden keep had been deemed militarily useless or superseded by new technology, which really we're talking about the 12th, 13th century. So I would say that this is 12th, 13th century, that's 11th century, and yeah, the perimeter wall might be 14th century, but why couldn't it also be 14th century? Sort of 13th century rather. So if to me it seems like this is more likely to be exactly the same date as that perimeter wall over there that we looked around. So an interesting one, Bramber Castle. Let's do some research. Let's throw the gates open. My theory would be that this is late 11th century. Motte and Bailey Castle would have been all wood, wooden tower on the top, wooden palisade around, and then in the 13th century I think they built this and all of the perimeter wall around, and then I think it probably went out of use in the 14th century because in the 14th century there was a general move towards fortified houses because there wasn't really a serious threat of invasion anymore for the most part, certainly by 1370 after the peace with France. Anyway, I hope that was interesting, folks. That has been Bramber Castle. I've enjoyed showing you around it. I might try and do a little bit more research online when I get home to find out if I can find out some more, if there have been any archaeological excavations up here or if there have been any papers written about it, because I think it's quite an interesting site. More so because it's such a ruin and kind of off the map. Not many people have been to, or even heard of Bramber Castle. It's quite an interesting one, and yet obviously in the 11th century it was very, very importantly part of the series of castles built in the wake of William the Conqueror's victory. Anyway, that's the church, incidentally, which was built allegedly at a similar time as the perimeter wall or tower. Perhaps there's an earlier version. There's a little clue, incidentally, up in, if I get my finger in the right place, you can just see there's a little remnant of a column up in the wall there, which does look like an 11th century column, but like it's been placed there later. So it could be that there was an 11th century church here originally, and then this, which is probably a 13th century church, maybe 12th century, 13th century, that's a later window, I'm aware of that. That's a later bit on the end, I would say. But it could be that the original church was 11th century, and then when they built a slightly more substantial one in the 12th or 13th century, maybe they reused material from the old one and just incorporated it as they saw fit. Anyway, I hope that's been interesting, and I'll see you again in the next video. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and feel free to follow us on Facebook.